Welcome to my channel. So hi, my name is Jeremy Lee and I made this video for my grade 5 students who have to stay at home because of this kind of like the virus thing. So today we're going to talk about Alfred the Great. Now, every nations, every countries, they will have their founding fathers. Like for us, Indonesian, our founding fathers is Bung Karno and also Bung Hatta. Soekarno, Hatta. Perhaps that is the first time that you heard that name. If not, well, okay, maybe someday we will talk about like Indonesian history. Anyway, Alfred the Great was known as you can say, the founding fathers of the modern countries right now. We know it as an England. It's not that simple, but yeah, it is. Okay, so a little bit background story about England. Okay, now when we talk about the history of England, it's quite a bit complicated because where should I begin? Maybe I should begin with during the time of Romans. The first century BC, Julius Caesar attempted to conquer the land, and then after that put that island into under the Roman. Yeah, he was kind of successful, but not the whole island was conquered because the natives were known as the Celts or the Celtics, are very vicious, are very kind of like savage warriors, and the Romans having hard times to subdue them. Okay, fast forward the story a little bit now to the time like around 400-ish AD, where this is the time like when the Roman Empire's power is already dwindling, they're already getting weaker. And then it is the time that when Germanic barbarian tribes start to kind of like taking the lands, claiming the territory that used to belongs to the Roman Empire, including the British island. I mean the Britain island, the Isle of the Britain. I always got confused with the name. Britain, the Isle of Britain Island. Okay, I'll correct that one later in the edit text. My point is, I'll show you the map over there. Yeah, I'll show you guys the map. Yeah, I'm talking about this island. Okay, right. So, including one of this Germanic tribe known as the Anglo people and also the Saxon people. Now, they all together, they claim this island as theirs. And then as they claim it, they kind of like collaborate. That's the word. They name that land as the Anglo land, as the Anglo land. That's where you get the word England. Anglo land, England. Get it? Yes. Now, this Anglo Saxon, they separated themselves into different kingdoms. Again, I'll show you guys the map over there. Okay, Northumbria, Mercia, East Anglia, Wessex, and Sussex. Okay, these are the 5 major Anglo-Saxon kingdoms in this island. They are not really unified. They speak the same language, but probably with different kind of like variations of the dialect. What I'm trying to say is, this island, I think Roman know them as a Britannia, they are not unified. Yeah, they were divided. Yeah, but they have the same culture, the Anglo-Saxon. During the Viking Age or the Age of Vikings, as you guys remember from my previous lectures, the Vikings, they constantly raiding and plundering the coastal cities in Europe, including these Anglo-Saxon kingdoms. One of the famous one, if you guys remember, was the attack of the Lindisfarne monastery in Northumbria. Yeah, it was a big big monastery, and of course that news, it was a big news back then at the time. And then the news about the Viking kind of like cruelty was spread across the Europe so fast. The Vikings, over the times, they invade huge chunk part of like the Britannia island, and then they claim a huge amount of territory, and they name it as a Danelaw. Now these are the Vikings specifically from the modern country that we know right now as Denmark. With that kind of like background story, now I am going to put our protagonist story over here, which is Alfred. Alfred, he was the son of a king, a Wessex king, a king by the name of Ethelwulf. For your information though, Wessex means Western Saxon, okay? Saxon, so yeah. And then like you got also there the name of Sussex, it means like Southern Saxon, okay? According to the story, Alfred was born, and then he was like the youngest of all in his clan. he was the most least likely will become the next king after Ethelwulf. Now, somehow the story about Alfred the Great was kind of like mixed with some of the myths and some of the facts. But nevertheless, there was this kind of like moral message that we can learn from these lessons, from his story, from his biography. Things getting more interesting when this Danelaw start to expanding their territory aggressively. Kingdom of Mercia had fallen. The kingdom of East Anglia is already fallen into this expansions of like the this kind of like the Danelaw. Now, one of the character of the Viking character that you need to know is someone by the name of Ivar the Boneless. Ivar the Boneless. Yeah. So what a name. We're not sure like why he was named Ivar the Boneless. Some people said that he was so nimble, he was so good in kind of like fighting in the battle that it looks like as if he had no bones. It was just like so flexible, so swift and fast. That means he's very deadly, like a ninja Viking. I'm not sure. How would you imagine that? Or some people said the name is like Ivar the Boneless because he have a problem with his bones. He have a crippled leg, I think. So, but still, Ivar the Boneless. He was very ruthless. He was very feared. He was like considered to be kind of like violent and cruel. And under his leadership, the Danelaw expand. Yeah. Now in this kind of like story, Alfred, he become the king during the time of like Danelaw tried to kind of like conquering the rest of the island. Now, the story goes like this: all of Alfred's older brother died in the battle. All of his big brothers died in a war against they tried to stop the Danelaw from expanding. And there you go. That makes like Alfred the Great become the king. Yeah. So he become a king just because there's no options, there's no choice. Now, Alfred the Great, he was a king that probably just kind of like the better version of Charlemagne. He was a king that really concerned about education. He is also at the same time, he's a king that really concerned about culture. At the same time, he is the king that is concerned about the church, and he's also a king that really concerned about the welfare and about justice. Okay, about this kind of like how to become a good king. And yes, he is. Okay. Now there was this kind of like famous story that about Alfred the Great, that one day his army about to fight with the Vikings. It was someone else by the name of Guthrum. Okay, Guthrum. So by this time, Ivar the Boneless, I do not know what happened to him, but then again, the leadership was being replaced by Guthrum. He was on the way to meet the Guthrum in the battlefield, but then again, in the middle of the way, his army was ambushed. Okay, was attacked out of nowhere, and that forced him to hide, and that forced him to run. And he ran into the swamp. He tried to remove all of his identity as a king. Now it was a very kind of like humiliating experience for Alfred though. Before he was he was like very kind of someone who is bragging, someone who is overconfident that he never loses in a battle. Now he have to hide. He was there alone, separated from the rest of his army. As starvation start to hit him, he have to he have to live like a beggar. Okay. One day he met a poor farmer's family, and then this poor farmer family welcomed him into their house, treat him with hospitality as a guest. Now, it was a very touchy moment for Alfred, and then Alfred, he was being welcomed. The farmer, even though they are poor, they are kindly enough to let him to stay. Now, however, there's this kind of like interesting story. One day, okay, the wife of the farmer asked Alfred to watch over the cake. Okay, now I'm talking about cake, not that kind of cake, but cake. You bake some wheat, and then apparently in the past they eat it as a food. Okay, not that kind of cake. So to watch over the fire, because like the wife is kind of like making a cake for everyone. So thinking like after work very hard in the farm. By the time before evening they came back, and after that they will eat the delicious cake. Yeah. Now these are the poor family, and guess what? Alfred fell asleep. Yeah. Some stories said that Alfred, he was daydreaming that he did not pay attention to the fire. Now what happened with the cake? the cake was burned. Now, when the wife of the farmer came, she was so mad. She was so mad, and then she started to tongue lashing. Okay, she was starts scolding Alfred so bad, insulting Alfred as a lazy dog, and then as someone who is not being grateful or being safe and everything. Instead of Alfred retaliate or try to defend himself or try to making excuses, no, he was just go simply quiet, and then he was just he just nodded his head, and I said, I'm sorry. And he said he said he apologized, and he was being humble, and after that he did not say anything at all. Until finally, he was being, according to the story, he was being evicted. He was, okay, off you go from my house and never come back again. You are ungrateful strangers, whatever it is. So Alfred left. Okay, he politely left. Soon after that, he rejoined with the rest of his army. Apparently the rest of his army tried to look for him because he has been hiding. I mean, he had been hiding in the swamp for several days, right? Because yeah, he got ambushed. I mean, don't blame him. I mean, don't be harsh on him. Apparently, Alfred and the rest of his army, he passed through in front of the house of the farmer. When the wife of the farmer knew that Alfred was not just an ordinary beggar, that turned out to be his king, and of course, the wife of the farmer was so terrified, and she kneeled, she begged to the king, please, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to. I didn't know you were a king and everything. Now, I don't know with you guys. If you are King Alfred at this moment, you were being you were being scolded by this, by her. What would you do? What are you talking about? You're just a poor farmer, and you live in my land, and then I am your king. Ha 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 ha. You will probably unleash your anger or wrath upon her. No, Alfred did not do that. He's not that kind of king. Okay, that's what makes him a great king. He did not retaliate. In fact, he was just he was just excuse her, and then just move along as if it's not a big deal. In fact, Alfred, he felt that it was that moment was a lesson for him to stay humble. Okay, that to promise that he will no longer brag, he will no longer be overconfident. Now, he continued the fight against the Danes, against Guthrum. Okay, there was this little story that in order for him to defeat the Guthrum, he need to study the customs of the Vikings. So he disguised himself as a shepherd. He disguised himself as a musician, and then he play music. And then as he play music, he he take notes. He taking pictures of the camp of the Vikings of a Guthrum, and after that he went back home, and after that he explained the plan and everything. Anyway, there was this important battle between the Danes and also the Anglo Saxon. The Battle of Edington happens around 878. Now in this battle, he decisively defeat Guthrum, the Danes. Now there was this a detail that interesting to know, that Guthrum thought after he was defeated, he thought that he was going to be tortured. He's going to be captured, and he's going to be tortured. Because actually the Vikings, that's the way they knew. If they were being captured by the enemies, they will be tortured. In fact, Guthrum was surprised. He was being he was being treated kindly, and that makes him wonder why? Why, Alfred? Why, King Alfred? Why are you doing this? I am your enemy. I am your captive right now. You just have defeated me. Why are you sparing me? Why are you having mercy on me? And this is what? This is the answer of King Alfred. I spare you. I am treating you kindly, and I forgive you, O Guthrum, because I serve the Prince of Peace. Drop the mic. So now, and he was impressed, and later that day, Guthrum decided to be baptized, and Guthrum, the king of Danes, become Christian. And somewhere along the way, of course, the whole Danelaw, the whole Vikings in Danelaw, now they decided to be baptized and become Christian. Now that is all because Alfred. Okay, so the whole Danelaw now become Christians. So now what happened between the Anglo Saxon kingdom, which and also the Danes and the Vikings, they become friends. Okay, and they live happily ever after. Well, not really, but yeah, sort of. So they start to exchanging the culture, they're exchanging the language, and somehow, if you guys are linguistic nerd, did you guys realize that English language is a bit funny language? There are kind of like several pronunciation. I'm not an English teacher, so okay, you need to talk to your English teachers about this. There was this kind of like pronunciation or phonics that somehow sounds kind of like foreign. Now it happens because the language of English language is kind of like mixtures between different culture. Now one of this kind of like one of the main culture, one of the main feature of English get the influence from is from the Nordic language, okay? From this Nordic language that they got from the Danelaw. For example, every sounds, for example, this, that, thou, sound. It's usually it's adaptations from the Scandinavian language, and also another one, the word sk, okay, sk, okay. For example, ski, scout. It's a sound that foreign to the original kind of like we're talking about like Old English, okay. It was a new sound that is being introduced by the Scandinavian language. What kind of like English then King Alfred spoke during his time? Well, technically it was an Anglo Saxon language, or we knew it as the Old English. Perhaps it sounds like very foreign, but if you kind of like read it out loud, okay, and then you will somehow realize that some of the sounds are familiar. Sounds like an English, like a modern English right now. Yeah? Alright. Let's talk about his legacy. Now Alfred if I have to talk about his legacy, let me divide it into several parts. The first part, okay, when Alfred became a king, he had the strategy of building castles. He built a lot of castles in different places, which is the purpose of these castles is of course for defense. We're going to talk about castles in the future lectures, okay? Now, as the castle was being built, it provided protection, it provided peace for the local people. Now, the locals, they like what? They trust Alfred, they trust the government, and Alfred provide them protection. So he create stability. Yeah. Later it will be followed by the rest of the kind of like kings after him, building castles. Okay. Now the next part, he was concerned with the education, and this is the difference between like Charlemagne. Charlemagne concerns about education, but unfortunately, Charlemagne doesn't know how to read and how to write. Someone read it for him. Okay, someone write it for him. He know how to read. He know how to write. He speak Latin fluently. He speak Anglo Saxon, and now he speak Scandinavian language. The next part is that the third legacy. Alfred is concerned with law and justice. Now think it this way. What do you think? Okay, can you imagine you play, for example, you play soccer or you play sport, but then again, the rules and the law are never written. There's no clear rules in playing certain games or playing certain sports. It will be madness, isn't it? You cannot play along, and then it's just like frustrating. Now, what does it mean? That means every law, every rules must be written. Yeah, must be written. Cannot just like simply like memorize and after that they add up like a new thing. So cannot. It's not gonna work. Now, Alfred, he knew about that principle, so he codified. It means he make it as a written document. The English law, okay, the common law. He wrote the kind of like he codified and he named it as the Dombok, okay, Dombok. There's no kind of like right translation into English. Probably the closest is they call it as a Doom book, okay, Doom book. Now, Doom is it means law. So if you translate it roughly, it means like the law book. Yeah. So basically, it consists of a written law written by Alfred, with the hope that everybody knows about the rules and everybody follows the rules. Okay, next part. He really cared about the church and education, so from his own pocket, he support the church and he support the monastery to become the place of learning, to become the place of preserving the knowledge, and so people can go to people can go to the monastery to learn. Okay, they can study from the old manuscript that is being preserved, that is being stored, that is being copied by the monks. Think about that for a moment. Okay, so and also he turned this particular city in the British Isle by the name of London as the center of a government. That what makes like London right now London is because because of King Alfred. So conclusion, okay, King Alfred was a very important king of an Anglo-Saxon. Now every kind of like event in the Middle Ages chapters has something to do with him. Okay, and as later on we found out, like, he became the founder of England. Now let me end this lessons with this kind of the epitaph that is being made to honor Alfred the Great. Alfred the Great, the West Saxon king. Alfred found learning dead, and he restored it. Education neglected, and he revived it. The law powerless, and he gave them force. The church debased, and he raised it. The land ravaged by fearful enemy, from which he delivered it. Alfred's name will live as long as mankind shall respect the past. There you go. Thank you for watching my lectures. I'll see you guys next time. Bye.